The Legend of the Christ Child, adapted from a retelling by Elizabeth Harrison. Once upon a time, long ago, on the night before Christmas, a little child was wandering all alone through the streets of a great city. There were many people in the street, fathers, mothers, sisters, brothers, uncles and aunts, even gray-haired grandfathers and grandmothers, all of whom were hurrying home with bundles of presents for each other and their little ones. Fine carriages rolled by, express wagons rattled past, even old carts were pressed into service. All things seemed in a hurry, and glad with expectation of the coming Christmas morning. From some of the windows bright lights were already beginning to stream, until it was almost bright as day, but the little child seemed to have no home, and wandered about listlessly from street to street. No one took any notice of him, except perhaps Jack Frost, who bit his bare toes and made the ends of his fingers tingle. The north wind, too, seems to notice the child, for it blows against him and pierces his ragged garments through and through, causing him to shiver with cold. Home after home he passed, looking with longing eyes through the windows in upon the glad, happy children, most of whom were helping to trim the Christmas trees for the coming morrow. "Surely," said the child to himself, "when there is so much gladness and happiness, some of it may be for me." So with timid steps he approached a large and handsome house. Through the windows he could see a beautiful Christmas tree already lighted. Many presents hung upon it. Its green boughs were trimmed with gold and silver ornaments. Slowly he climbed the broad steps and gently rapped at the door. It was opened by a tall and stately footman, who had a kindly face, though his voice was deep and gruff. He looked at the little child for a moment, and sadly shook his head, and said, "Go down off the steps. There is no room here for such as you." He looked sorry as he spoke. Through the open door a bright light shone, and the warm air, filled with the fragrance of the Christmas pine, rushed out from the inner room and greeted the little wanderer like a kiss. As the child turned back into the cold and darkness, he wondered why the footman had spoken thus, for surely, thought he, those children would love to have another companion to join them in their joyous Christmas festival. But the children inside did not even know he had knocked at the door. The street grew colder and darker as the child passed on. He went sadly forward, saying to himself, "Is there no one in all this great city who will share their Christmas with me?" Farther and farther down the street he wandered, to where the homes were not so large and beautiful. There seemed to be little children inside nearly all the houses. They were dancing and frolicking about. Christmas trees could be seen in every window, with beautiful dolls and trumpets and picture books and balls and tops and other wonderful toys hung upon them. In one window the child noticed a little lamb made of soft white wool. Around its neck was tied a red ribbon. It had evidently been hung on the tree for one of the younger children. The little wanderer stopped before this window and looked long and earnestly at the beautiful things inside, but most of all he was drawn toward the white lamb. At last, creeping up to the window-pane, he gently tapped upon it. A little girl came to the window and looked out into the dark street where the snow had now begun to fall. She saw the child, but she only frowned and shook her head, and said, "Go away, come some other time, we're too busy to take care of you now." Back into the dark, cold street he turned again. The wind was whirling past him and seemed to say, hurry on, we have no time to stop. 'Tis Christmas Eve, and everyone's in a hurry tonight." Again and again the child rapped softly at a door or a window-pane. Each place he was refused admission. One mother feared he might have a disease which her darlings would catch. Another father said he only had enough for his own children, and none to spare for beggar brats. Still another told him to go home where he had belonged, and not to trouble others. The hours passed, the night grew later, and the wind colder, the street darker. Farther and farther the little one wandered. There was scarcely anyone left on the streets by this time, and the few who remained did not notice him. Suddenly, ahead of him, there appeared a single bright ray of light. It shone through the darkness into the child's eyes, and he looked up smiling, and said, "I will go where the light beckons. Perhaps they will share their Christmas with me." Hurrying past all the other houses, he soon reached the end of the street, and went straight up to the window from which the light gleamed. The house was old and small, but the child cared not for that. The light seemed still to call him in. From what do you suppose the light came? Nothing but a candle that had been placed in an old cup with a broken handle in the window, as a glad token of Christmas Eve. There was neither curtain nor shade at the small square window, and as the little child looked in, he saw standing upon a neat wooden table a small Christmas tree. The room was plainly furnished, but very clean. Near the fireplace sat a sweet-faced mother with a little 2-year-old on her knee and an older child beside her. The two were looking into their mother's face and listening to a story. She must have been telling them a Christmas story, I think. A few bright coals were burning in the fireplace, and all seemed light and warm within. The wanderer crept closer to the window-pane. So sweet was the mother's face, so loving seemed the children, that he took courage and tapped gently, very gently, on the door. The mother stopped talking, and the children looked up. "What was that, mother?" said the little girl at her side. "I think it was someone tapping at the door," said the mother. "Run quickly and open it, for it's a bitter cold night to keep anyone waiting in this storm." "Mother, I think it was the bough of the tree tapping on the window-pane," said the little girl. "Please go on with the story." Again the wanderer tapped at the door. "My child," cried the mother, rising, "That is certainly a rap on the door. Run quickly and open it. No one must be left in the cold on Christmas Eve." The child ran to the door and threw it wide. The mother saw the ragged stranger standing without, cold and shivering, with bare head and almost bare feet. She held out both hands and drew him into the warm, bright room. "You poor dear child," was all she said, and putting her arms round him, drew him close to her breast. "He's very cold, my children," she exclaimed. "We must warm him." "And," said the little girl, "we must love him and give him some of our Christmas, too." "Yes," said the mother, "but first let us warm him." The mother sat down beside the fire with the child on her lap, and her own 2 little ones warmed his half-frozen hands with theirs. The mother smoothed his tangled curls, and bending low over his head, kissed the child's forehead. She gathered the 3 little ones close to her, and the candle and the firelight shone over them. For a moment the room was very still. I think she must have been praying. Then she whispered to the little girl, who ran into the other room and returned with a bowl of bread and milk for the stranger. By and by the little girl said softly to her mother, "Could we light the Christmas tree and let him see how beautiful it looks?" "Yes," replied the mother. With that she seated the child on a low stool beside the fire, and went herself to fetch the few simple ornaments which from year to year she had saved for her children's Christmas tree. As they busied themselves about the tree, they began to notice the room was filled with a strange and wonderful light. Brighter and brighter it grew until it shone like the sun. From floor to ceiling all was light as day. When they turned and looked at the spot where the wanderer had sat, it was empty. There was nothing to be seen. The child was gone, but the light was still in the room. "Children," said the mother quietly, "I believe we have had the Christ child with us tonight." And she drew her dear ones to her and kissed them, and there was great joy in the little house. The end.